So we're going to talk about design project number 3, which is to create a style guide for a publication. You will have the option to kind of choose either the publication that you currently are advising or one that just seems like it would work for you. It could be for a yearbook, a student newspaper, or a magazine. Any of those would work. And basically, what you want to do is create a set of styles that your staff would use for that publication's look. This will serve more as a guide for them to create their own guide, as opposed to you sort of dictating what which fonts they should use and what the drop cap should look like and that sort of thing. Ideally, this is more of just an example that they can use when they go each year to create their style guides. And this is something that your students on your staff should do with each year is just have those conversations about what they want the look of the publication to be. You sometimes hear the term style guide refer to things that might be connected to AP style, stylistic devices that you might choices that you might make in stories. Are we going to refer to the teachers as Mr. and Mrs., or are we just going to refer to them by their first name? Or those are style guides as well. This is kind of a different thing that we're not necessarily focused on. We're really looking at the look of the publication. And so ideally, you working your way through this process will give you a sense of how your students might do this as well. I also think this is a good one of those good sort of end of the year activities for your new staff to think about. So at this past year, one of my magazine staffs, after the new editors had taken their positions, the next year's editors had been chosen. We're getting close to the end of the year. The seniors are either out or just about out of school, and so we're kind of really focused on the following year instead of the current year. That's one of the things that I had my editors do was take a look at what they wanted to do in terms what they liked about the current style of the magazine and what they wanted to do for the next year. And so it's a really nice opportunity for them to really think forward, but it also gives them something really useful to do, because that can be a difficult time to sort of figure out, what am I going to have my students doing. So style guides, we really don't think about this very often, but they're everywhere, right? You see style guides all over the place, and every entity, every group has a particular company has a particular style to it, and oftentimes these are things that are much more set down in stone than we think they are. All the way down to even the particular styles that I'm using in this slideshow that I did not create. I just kind of picked a standard template that I thought was kind of cool looking. And that template comes with a whole bunch of different keynote slides that you can use. And each of those slides, this one I did create because I kind of went through and highlighted each of the different types of text and kind of give you the rundown on what's being used as the style for this particular slideshow. But they are all over the place. So a few that I just kind of pulled from different places. These are just samples that may or may not be able to find depending on how readily available the actual style guide is. But these are just screenshots of some of them. So the Urban Outfitters style guide, where they talk about the different fonts that they use and what their designers are able to do. This is the I Love New York, very specific styles in terms of what they want that logo to look like. And this creates a certain look for a company, and they really don't want to alter from that very much. They want that look to be standardized. And that's, of course, something that you're doing with your student publications as well. Here are all the icons that are used in the Skype style guide. Specifics about Adobe and when you're able to use that logo and how standard it should be, and the red flag logo versus the standalone logo and how those things actually interact with each other. These are kind of a cool look into the subway system and the transit authority and all the different styles that they use. Of course, Helvetica is the font that's being used there. Even down to the Boy Scouts in the news recently, but the Boy Scouts of America and all of the specifics in terms of their style. So again, just it's not something you necessarily think about all the time, but these are out there and you can see them all over the place. So then we want to look a little bit at some style guides that are created by student publications. There's a couple of really interesting, cool ones out there. Well, one in particular that I want to draw your attention to. This is a style guide, a friend of mine, Aaron Manful, who advises in Francis Howell North High School in Missouri. His staff each year creates a new style guide and has a really nice look to it. It's almost like there's a cool design look to the style guide itself, which is talking about the design of the publication. And here they tell you all about all of the different fonts that they're using, what sizes and fonts can be used for headlines and subheadlines, how they're doing their page numbers and folios, what sort of color patterns they're using, what the pull quotes look like. And then this is something, and again, this is a really, really good one. This is something that would be used each year and changed so that each staff comes in and kind of determines what their new ones are. This is a goal for me and my staff in terms of getting to a point where we've got a document that looks like this. Oftentimes, our staff ones are much more informal, and they also change, I've noticed, throughout the course of the year. So our yearbook style guide, really, as we started getting into the actual nitty-gritty designing of the publication, started to change as we go. And this past year, for instance, we were using a body copy font that we realized partway through was bigger than we thought it was going to be. Especially happens in yearbook or in broadsheet newspaper, where when you print things out, you don't necessarily see them at actual size, but a shrunken version. And then all of a sudden, you print something in actual size, and it's much bigger than you thought it was. So we ended up shifting our body copy font from 10 to 9 point early on enough in the year that it didn't negatively affect things too much. It made our caption font size went from 8 to 7 because we just realized that it wasn't working the way we wanted it to work, and it was certainly readable at a smaller point size. And so the point, I guess, is that these can be sort of a working document. It doesn't have to be set in stone and done, and that's what it is, and that's what it'll always be. You certainly can feel free to change these. Here's the North Star style guide from them. I think the following year. I think the first one was first, and then this came the next year. And you can see how the format of the document and the things that they're including are essentially the same, but they've changed around a little bit some of the pieces that they're using. And it looks like, we'll flip back, in the year before, they were using font choices that were a little bit different and not quite the same, because I see all normal headlines in News Gothic Standard, and here they're using Babus Neue, which has been kind of an in font for a while, so they've kind of shifted that format in terms of the fonts that they're using, and it really does change the look of the publication each year. It's a good way to keep fresh with your publication. It's also a good way to give ownership to your new editors and give them an opportunity to really feel like they're establishing their own vision for the publication. Okay, so this is essentially what you're creating. Here's another example of one that might look closer to what you'll be doing. It follows along with some of the specifics that you'll actually be putting into your style guide. And if you think back to one of our second assignment, I believe, the week 2 assignment, where I had you put together a graphics notebook, a lot of these pieces are repeated there. So the distinction then between the graphics notebook and what you're doing with your style guide is that these would be specific to what you're actually using in the publication. The graphics notebook would be examples of things that are out there that you might incorporate and use as inspiration. And then the style guide would be created, and it could be based on those, but created with specifics that would actually be in your publication. So feel free to backtrack to that graphics notebook and see if there are pieces that are in there that you think you might actually want to use. You certainly want to set up your general specifications. And what I would recommend in doing this assignment is opening an InDesign template that's the same size as the publication that you're creating the style guide for. In other words, if you're doing this for a tabloid magazine, open that size format and try out these choices and all of the different typefaces that you think you might want to use, what you're putting your headlines and decks in, how you're doing your photo credits. Put all those on a page. You don't have to turn it in for the assignment, but you certainly want to see sort of how these things work. And if you want to uh, maybe save yourself a little bit of time, or at least kind of streamline some of the assignments, the next assignment for the following week, week 6 assignment, is to create a feature page. And what you might consider doing is then taking the style sheet that you created and utilizing those styles when you go to create that actual page. And that's a different video that I'll be showing you in terms of creating that feature page. But you certainly could feel free to kind of be working back and forth a little bit in terms of looking at those two assignments together, because they are, that's part of the reason I'm introducing them together, is to give you an opportunity to do that. At any rate, these are some of the things that you would include, and you certainly want to test them out and make sure that they work. So here's a page with different type styles. Pick a copy that you think has lots of different functionality. You've got different options. So Myriad is the one that's here, and you can see how there's a whole slew of different types of Myriad, from just regular all the way to Myriad Pro, semi-bold, semi-condensed. And these give your designers some different options in terms of being able to work good, cool fonts together. It's not so limiting that they can't really design well, but it's also not so crazy that they're able to use 27 different fonts and not really able to use them together. There's some common kind of middle ground in there, and the best middle ground, I think, is to pick one family that has a whole bunch of different font choices within it. So Myriad Pro is a good example of that. All right, so then here's another page where you're looking at some section flags that you might use for each of those, and of course they'd be a little smaller. This is, I believe, for a tabloid size newspaper. Standing heads, different things that you would see in your newspaper on a regular basis. Every issue that comes out, you would have a staff editorial, and so you want to make sure that whatever that choice is for that standing headline, it's the same from issue to issue, that you have that continuity. Of course, these fact boxes would be different from issue to issue in terms of content, but the look, again, you want your readers to become comfortable with sort of knowing what things look like in your publication. So there's a couple pages that you might look at. Here's the first one that we looked at before, and then this one. There's no page limit requirement in terms of what this looks like. You're going to do it in InDesign on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and then turn it into a PDF to submit to the Dropbox in D2L. But it doesn't necessarily matter how big or small, how many pages are actually in it. What I do want you to focus on, and this PDF will be in the folder for you so that you have access to it. There are, I think, 23 different categories that you would have here. And what I'd like you to do is choose at least 18 of them. That gives you a little bit of wiggle room if there's a couple things that you just are super frustrating, or you can't find, or you just don't want to design. So let's say at least 18 of these that you're going to pick, and kind of like you did with the graphics notebook, here you're not so much finding examples online, although that might help spark you a little bit in terms of being able to come up with some good ones. But here you're actually creating them yourself. So some are certainly going to be very significant. I would assume typefaces and cut lines and headlines are certainly ones that you are going to want to include. But there's maybe some others towards the bottom that you might choose to leave off for the purposes of this style guide. But that's kind of the idea, is to take all of those elements and create what would be a style guide for your publication that then you could ideally share with your students as an example of a style guide that they might create for theirs. As usual, if you have any questions, please make sure that you ask. And you certainly can post those on Facebook or shoot me an email if you do have any questions on those. and this assignment is due at the end of the week 5. Good luck, and we'll talk to you soon.